You arrive in Australia with a picture already living in your mind. You think of Sydney Harbour, the Opera House, famous beaches, postcard skylines, and the landmarks the whole world already knows. And yes, those places are beautiful. They deserve their place in the imagination. But the real surprise of Australia often begins after you leave the obvious behind. It begins when the road gets quieter. It begins when the crowds thin out. It begins when the country stops performing and simply starts existing around you. That is when Australia changes. That is when it stops feeling like a list of famous places and starts feeling like a land with depth, mood, silence, and soul. And once you begin to travel that way, you realize something powerful. The Australia most people remember is often not only the Australia they plan to see, it is the Australia they almost missed. You begin in Port Fairy, at the far end of the Great Ocean Road, where the mood changes from spectacle to gentleness. The famous road trip may draw people in with dramatic cliffs and icons, but by the time you reach Port Fairy, you find something quieter, more intimate, and somehow more lasting. You find a place that does not compete for attention. It does not need to. You walk slowly here. You notice boats resting in still water. You notice old cottages, weathered stone, wide skies, and light that feels softer than it did back on the famous roadside lookouts. The sea is still there. The wind is still there. But the energy has changed. Here, the coast is not trying to impress you. It simply invites you to stay a little longer. And that is the first lesson Hidden Australia gives you. Beauty does not always shout. Sometimes it lowers its voice and waits for you to come closer. Then you keep moving along the coast and discover that beyond the famous 12 Apostles lies a wider story. The Shipwreck Coast feels raw, dramatic, and deeply historical. You stand above the cliffs and look down into dark blue water crashing against ancient rock, and suddenly the landscape feels heavier with meaning. This is not polished beauty. This is beauty with weight, beauty with memory, beauty that feels as if it has watched too much wind, too many storms, and too many human ambitions trying to cross the sea. The cliffs do not just stand there, they seem to remember. And in that moment, Australia feels older than the travel brochures. It feels layered. It feels haunted in the most beautiful way. This is where you begin to understand that Hidden Australia is not only made of charming towns and quiet beaches. It is also made of landscapes that carry time in them. From there, you travel west in your imagination to Coffin Bay and the Eyre Peninsula, where South Australia becomes wilder, cleaner, and more elemental. But when you picture it deeply, you do not only see oysters or seafood or the coastal reputation that first draws people in. You see vast water, quiet inlets, bright light, and the kind of untamed shoreline that feels less crowded by human noise. You imagine yourself standing near the bay with the smell of salt in the air, tasting something fresh from the water, and realizing that Hidden Australia is not only about what you see. It is also about how a place enters your body through taste, sound, light, and stillness. Coffin Bay feels like a place where Australia is allowed to be spacious. It lets you breathe differently. It lets you slow down. And in that slowing down, you start to understand the country more deeply than any quick itinerary ever could. Then the coast falls behind you, and the land rises into the Flinders Ranges, where outback South Australia becomes rugged, weathered, and ancient. You do not just look at the Flinders Ranges, you feel them. You feel them in the folded rock lines, in the ochre tones, and in the way the land seems to open itself slowly rather than all at once. This is not the kind of place that gives you instant understanding. It asks for patience. It asks for silence. It asks you to let the scale of the country settle into you. You stand there and realize that Australia is not only coastal and bright. It is also dry, old, sacred, and severe in the most beautiful way. Here, hidden Australia becomes geological. It becomes spiritual. It becomes something that reminds you how brief your own movement is compared with the age of the land beneath your feet. And there is something humbling in that, something that makes you quieter inside. Then you move farther west and deeper inward to Karijini National Park, one of the country's most dramatic landscapes. Karijini changes your sense of scale. You imagine red stone cut open by water, narrow gorges lit by sun from above, and pools of clear water hidden inside rock like secret chambers in the earth. This is the kind of place that feels almost unreal until you remember that Australia contains entire worlds. People never fully picture when they think only of its cities or famous beaches. In Karijini, hidden Australia becomes dramatic again, but in a completely different language from the coast. It is not about open horizons. It is about descent. It is about entering the earth and discovering that even the harshest-looking country can hold coolness, freshness, and surprise inside it. And that is part of Australia's magic. Just when you think you understand its character, the land reveals another side of itself, and that side feels just as true as everything that came before it. And then hidden Australia becomes surreal when you reach Purnululu National Park, home to the Bungle Range. You look at those striped domes and almost do not believe they belong to the same country as the quiet bays of South Australia or the fishing villages of Victoria. But that is exactly the point. Australia is not one visual mood. It is many countries of feeling inside one nation. Purnululu looks like something imagined, not discovered. Beehive domes rise from dusty plains. Strange stripes wrap around ancient rock. Isolated waterholes seem to hold on through heat and time. It feels as if the earth decided to become art. When you include places like this in your understanding of Australia, the country becomes much harder to reduce into stereotypes. It becomes stranger, richer, and more unforgettable. And perhaps that is what hidden places do best. They rescue a country from becoming too simple in your mind. Then there is the Gibb River Road, where the hidden place is not only the destination, but the journey itself. This is one of those routes where distance matters, where effort matters, and where the road seems to shape the traveler just as much as the traveler experiences the road. You imagine dust rising behind your wheels, river crossings, rugged country stretching outward, and the kind of travel that asks something from you before it gives something back. Hidden Australia is often like that. It rewards effort. It rewards those willing to go a little farther, a little slower, a little rougher, and a little deeper. On a road like this, you do not feel like you are collecting destinations. You feel like you are crossing into another rhythm of Australia altogether. And that rhythm changes the way you see everything that follows. Then the country changes again and becomes lush in Queensland's Scenic Rim. This is one of the most important reminders you can give yourself. Australia is not only coast and desert. It is also rainforest, valley, mist, and mountain. In the Scenic Rim, hidden Australia feels generous and green. You picture winding roads, country cafes, farms under broad skies, and forest trails leading to waterfalls. The air feels different here, softer, cooler, more fragrant, and that shift in mood matters because it shows just how varied Australia truly is when you step away from the most repeated images. You begin to understand that hidden Australia is not always remote. Sometimes it is surprisingly close to major cities. It simply lives beyond the attention most travelers give it. And that, perhaps, makes it even more meaningful. Then you sail across to Maria Island, off Tasmania's east coast, where the world becomes quieter still. This is the kind of place that changes your pulse. You do not go there for speed. You do not go there to consume one more destination and move on. You go there to feel what happens when modern noise falls away. You imagine walking on empty white sand, seeing wombats grazing without fear, passing old ruins, and feeling the strange peace that comes from a place where the human footprint has softened enough for the natural world to breathe. This is one of hidden Australia's greatest gifts. It gives you not only scenery, but a different tempo of life. And once you have felt that tempo, it becomes hard to forget. Some places impress you. Places like this recalibrate you. Finally, you arrive at Lord Howe Island, and it feels like the perfect ending for this first journey. It is beautiful, yes, but more than that, it feels protected, intentional, and unhurried. You imagine mountain peaks rising behind clear water, bikes instead of traffic, clean air, and an island that seems to resist the frantic pace of the modern world. Lord Howe reminds you that some places stay beautiful because they are not built for volume. They are built for care. They are built for balance. They are built in such a way that the place itself still feels like it belongs to its own rhythm, not to the endless pressure of being consumed. And perhaps that is the deeper truth behind all 10 places in this episode. Hidden Australia is not only about places most travelers miss, it is about places that still feel like themselves. And now, when you think of Australia, the image has changed. It is no longer only the obvious icons. Now it includes Port Fairy, Shipwreck Coast, Coffin Bay, the Flinders Ranges, Karijini, Purnululu, the Gibb River Road, the Scenic Rim, Maria Island, and Lord Howe Island. 10 places, 10 moods, 10 reminders that Australia is far deeper than the postcard version of itself. You began this journey expecting landmarks, but what you found instead were places with stillness, character, silence, and soul. Places that did not need to shout in order to stay with you. Places that made you feel not like a tourist passing through, but like a traveler being quietly invited in. And that is why Hidden Australia is the perfect beginning to this series. Because once you discover that the country's most memorable beauty often lives beyond the obvious, you never look at Australia the same way again. You stop asking what is famous here, and you start asking where this land feels most like itself. That is when the real journey begins. If this journey opened something in you, stay with Discover Australia deeply as you continue exploring Australia beyond the surface, one meaningful place at a time.